All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the first speaker, and this is Singh, who's currently an incident response consultant over at CrowdStrike. And Kay has been in the industry for quite some time. He's worked with various companies in a variety of engagements, ranging in dealing from advanced persistent threats, nation-state actors, e-crime, and insider threats. So, Kay, take it away.
I know there we go. Okay, so I know the people in Zoom land can actually see these slides, but they're not working here for now. So we will be doing this a little ad hoc. The title of this presentation is Unmasking Digital Extortion, Navigating the Ransomware Epidemic. It was working before. There is an About Me slide here, but I'll probably just do that verbally. I used to be after graduating college, I used to be at Cylance. I was an incident response consultant and the forensics lab manager there. So I dealt with just about the same thing here, major large-scale incidents. I also managed the forensics lab, and I worked with the FBI to work on criminal justice information. I eventually came over here to CrowdStrike, where I do, again, the same thing, dealing with much larger scale incidents. I also help run WRCCDC, which is the Western Region Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. So I'm a senior operations team member over there. I help handle the red team infrastructure as well as our own team's infrastructure. So there are three and a half reasons why threat actors want data, or to get into a company, to ransom it, so on and so forth. The first is pretty simple. It's monetary gain. Money makes the world go around. A lot of these groups are very simply only after the money. The second is defamation. There are several groups that are associated with not only ransoming their victims, but also defacing websites. There's been cases where in conflicts, threat actors will come out and attack the side that they oppose. The third is destabilization. We don't typically see this as much in ransomware cases, but there are groups of threat actors who will go after targets related to a country's infrastructure or other critical assets. We recently had the Colonial Pipeline hack some time ago. At this point, the time evades me. So those are the three primary reasons why a threat actor might want to go after a victim. The fourth one, which I don't have listed, is the simple sort of Joker status of they just want to cause carnage. So there are some threat actors who don't have a financial motivation or a motivation related to a nation state. They simply just want to cause carnage. Let's see if I can hit next. So there's about 5 or 6 primary targets for threat actor. The first is PII, which is personally identifiable information. Can anyone in the room give me an example of PII? Social Security number is the big one. It's the primary one. I can't see now. No, you're good. I'm going to stand over here a little bit out of the way. So the first one is PII, Social Security numbers, addresses, names, that sort of information. That tends to be decently valuable on the dark web. The second is PHI, or Protected Health Information. If you've ever heard of HIPAA, this is what HIPAA is designed to protect that information. Does anyone happen to have an example of PHI? PHI is items like your, oh, hey, we got slides. Cool, thank you. And they're gone. And they're back up. So we got PHI, which is protected health information, things like your doctor's, like your notes from your doctor's visits, those charts, that sort of information. That's the second big one. The third one is intellectual property. So anything ranging from schematics to proprietary formulas or informations, stuff like that. Financial information, items like company documents, like SEC filings, gross net income, so on and so forth. Strategic information sort of plays back into the destabilization aspect. Typically, we'll see nation-state targets go after defense contractors or actual parts of the government themselves, and that's their primary goal. And the last one is a little bit of a joke about just wanting to cause carnage. So we at CrowdStrike, generally these actors are known as e-crime actors, electronic crime. These are crimes both by federal, state, local laws. We depict them underneath a group called spiders. So we're known for naming our threat actors after certain animals or insects or whatever. We have given the spider moniker for all of the e-crime groups. A lot of these e-crime groups have interrelationships with each other, and we'll talk about that later in the slides. But there's dozens, if not hundreds, of these e-crime groups. We don't track everyone, let alone under a spider moniker, but the bigger, more nefarious ones or the more persistent ones that have been around for a while do get the spider moniker. Cool. So TTPs stand for Threats, Tactics, and Procedures. It's also known as tradecraft. These e-crime groups are, again, primarily after money, so they try to keep things low budget. They like to use free tools such as TeamViewer, AnyDesk, FleetDeck, simple Windows RDP, SSH, this sort of stuff. So that's their primary way of going around. Some threat actors will use pirated copies of Cobalt Strike, BruteRetel C4, Meterpreter. BruteRetel C4 and Cobalt Strike are well-known tools. Lots of legitimate people and companies use these day in and day out for red teaming. But you can very easily find pirated copies of Cobalt Strike and BruteRetel just on the internet if you Google. So free 99, it works. It keeps their baseline costs low as a business. We'll talk a little more too about why I just said business, but a lot of these e-crime groups also stick to simply Windows. They don't necessarily delve into Mac OS or Linux. It's just very simple Windows. Windows probably covers 80% of a company's infrastructure, so keep it simple, Windows, stuff like that. They also like to keep how they get into victim environments very simple. There are a group of actors that we call initial access brokers. They do one thing and one thing only. They get initial credentials into a victim's environment, they sell it off for more money. So IABs, that's one vector of getting in. Another vector are via unpatched services on the edge. If anyone's heard of MoveIt, which was a recent vulnerability with a file transfer software that just about everyone used, there's an easy way to get in and exfil a lot of data without anyone noticing. We also have Fortinet and FortiGate appliances, which are firewall appliances. They tend to be very vulnerable, and I think that's as much as I can say about that one. And the last one is Log4j, which is a Java-based exploit. A lot of different tools use Java, and Log4j was a logging stack inside of Java, and that was also very vulnerable. Cool. So e-crime actors, they don't like to spend too much time. Most of them will be within a week, and straight from initial intrusion all the way to giving the client the victim the ransom note, or the victim finding the ransom note. Some of these teams don't necessarily care that you have alerts going off everywhere, or they don't really care that you're going to see them doing things, because their goal is just to do things as quick as possible. Some groups are a little more cautious, and they will attempt to whitelist their crypto locker or their tools in your security software before they go and do their things. There are several groups that are known to go from initial intrusion to exfilling data in less than 72 hours. One of the e-crime groups I'll talk about today, Scattered Spider, is known to go from initial intrusion to exfil in less than 12 to 18 hours. So within 12 hours, they've already scoped the environment, and they already know what they're going for. Other ransomware groups like Wizard Spider, when they were still around, would take about 3 days, but by the start of the third day, you would see encryption events going off. Cool. So a lot of these ransomware companies have started running as a business. One of the key things we see is the ransomware as a service. So if you've ever heard of software as a service or platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, AWS has all of those. You're essentially renting out something. You're renting out virtual machines, you're renting out software or tooling from them. Well, now you can just rent ransomware and spread it around. There's a couple of key ransomware players like Lockbit, AlphaV, Blockbuster, a couple others, and they operate as the provider of ransomware, and affiliates can simply walk up and say, hey, I'd like to buy your ransomware, we'll split the profits. Depending on the tier of service provided by the affiliate or the service group, you can vary that back and forth. A lot of these groups will give you documented instruction on what to do when they get into a victim's environment. So we'll talk about the Conti leaks later on, but these the parent ransomware groups will give documentation on, hey, this is what you do when you're in, this is how you deploy, here's step-by-steps of what you need to do. These affiliates are not necessarily locked to one ransomware strain either. You can have a group that uses both Lockbit 3.0 and Blockbuster, or Blockbuster and AlphaV. They're not necessarily locked to one quote-unquote vendor. Although typically affiliates, specifically with Lockbit 3.0, they like to stick to there because Lockbit has a tiered service. So there's 3 different stages of a ransomware event. You have initial access, which is when the threat actor gets in, they get their first access, just starting to poke around and see what's going on. This is the first 12 to 24 hours typically. Then you have pre-encryption. With pre-encryption, the threat actor has already exfiltrated the data that they want, so they've already gotten at PII, PHI, whatever, or they're doing it. It's currently ongoing, and now they're preparing to encrypt the environment. So now they're working on spreading the malware everywhere and making it executable. And post-encryption is when everything is blown away. We'll talk about this later, but the long and short of it is that the crypto lockers don't necessarily encrypt only your personal data. That was not me. So initial access, typically we'll just go with the standard idea that a threat actor has gotten someone's credentials. Maybe someone's passwords were leaked on the internet or via something like Recruit Stealer or Info Stealer. The passwords have been dumped from Chrome. I promise that was not me. And so in some cases, you'll see that the threat actor activity has been determined by the antivirus or the EDR, which is endpoint detection and response software. So there might be alerts going off. Maybe the alerts are seen and they're not actioned upon because someone deems them false positives. Maybe they are actioned upon, but upper management says, it's fine, it's a Friday, we need to go home. There's a human element in all of this, not just on the ransomware operator side, but on the victim side as well. So you'll see random accounts suddenly using remote access tools, or RATs as we like to call them. So they might be using RDP, which is remote desktop. It's built into Windows. They'll be using that to move around. They'll be using tools like advanced IP scanner or angry IP scanner to see what else is going on in the environment, so on and so forth. You also see a lot of these ransomware groups use legitimate red team tools. Bloodhound, Meterpreter, Lasagna, Empire. Once again, legitimate tools that are either free or easily piratable, and they'll use this to enumerate the environment and see what weaknesses they have. This is also where you'll probably start to see DLP alarms, or data loss and protection alarms, for files that are being lifted out of the environment. So something's going off saying, hey, files are being lifted out, something's going on. So the next step is when the ransomware is starting to be moved throughout the environment. This is typically the actual executable that encrypts the environment. So threat actors will use, again, the easiest ways. Eternal Blue is a vulnerability that was sort of revealed, I think, a couple of years ago at this point, and every Windows system previous to that was acceptable to that. It uses a sharing feature of Windows to get into systems. So it's easy, it works, it takes all of 10 seconds to use. They might use that to deploy the crypto locker. PDQ and SCCM, or it's called N2 now. It might be called something else tomorrow, depending on how Microsoft feels. Those are two commonly used tools to deploy patches or software to endpoints. So they might be using PDQ to deploy a new version of Chrome to everyone. Jamf is the Windows equivalent. They might be using Jamf to update Macs or force updates on Macs. Threat actors are known to leverage these tools because they're in place. They don't have to do anything to set them up. It's all done for them. They just need to log in and say, hey, I want to deploy this to all of these systems and run it at this time. I mentioned before the DLP alarms will probably be going off. Typically, alongside the DLP alarms, you'll also see the edge firewalls tracking the action. So at the edge network, you will have firewalls that will be saying, hey, we've got like 20 terabytes of data going out. So that's the other place that you will see the exfil activity happening. Cool. Everything's been torched and burned. So like I mentioned earlier, these crypto lockers are not, they're not caring about what to encrypt. They tend to just encrypt whatever they have permissions to encrypt. So this can be anything from documents to system files to logs, that sort of stuff. These can completely cripple systems, causing them to not boot or not operate, and that hinders both recovery and forensics efforts. Typically, a lot of the clients are in a bit of a panic because everything's on fire. So they might actually be physically pulling network cords. They might be unplugging systems to try and stop the ransomware from propagating. At this point, there's typically two targets that are hit first by the encryptor. The first are, actually this is kind of in reverse order, but the first primary target is the backup servers. So the reason why they go after the backup servers in addition to sort of the production service that store the data is because they want to make sure that you have to go to the group and you have to negotiate with them. It's essentially a hostage situation because they're taking all of these hostage. The second set of hosts are ESXi, or virtualization hosts. ESX is a virtualization operating system. It's very, very common in production, and they don't support antivirus at all. The company has decided that it doesn't need antivirus, so those hosts get crippled first, and that will cause other infrastructure to fall in a cascade failure. And for us, consultants, the race is on for us to determine what happened during the event, and we need to get information to the client so they can start spinning things up, as well as do public releases. You may have seen recently with the MGM and Caesars hack, both of these companies had to do Section 8 filings with the SEC detailing that they got breached and the steps they took to try and fix it. For MGM, both of them consulted professional firms. Caesars indirectly said they paid their ransom, and MGM indirectly said they didn't. So that's the typical story. For organizations like hospitals, they have both, filings to do like that, but the other thing is they've got people sitting in the ER that need immediate assistance, right? So when they get hit, everything goes down. You're going back to paper charts. You're going back to not being able to document anything or share anything. You can't take people in on ambulances because there's no way to document who's going in, who's coming out. So organizations like hospitals or critical infrastructure, they need to be back up faster than everyone else. Literal lives are at stake. Any day now. There we go. Okay, so two of the main troubles that we face during the engagement is Active Directory. Active Directory Domain Services is essentially a database that tells everyone, hey, this person is part of the company, this is what they have permissions to, so on and so forth. That will typically get destroyed during an engagement. Now you're faced with no one being able to log in. So that will cause a pretty big issue. PDQ and Intune both rely on Active Directory, so if the ransomware group has used PDQ to deploy and then torched that system, you have no way to launch your forensic efforts easily across the entire environment. The other thing is centralized logging. A lot of companies may not have a centralized logging system, so there's no way to recover what happened from there. And local system logs will be typically overwritten by the ransomware, so there's no way to see what happened on those systems. So when we're trying to write the story of what happened, we don't have any data to go off of, and that causes issues for both us and the client. Negotiations, sometimes we will see clients choose to negotiate with the threat actor or choose a third-party firm to negotiate with the threat actor. This can give you a couple of things. The first is to delay the time between them exfilling data and releasing the information, so you can use it to try and delay the release and buy you more time to do analysis. The second is a lot of these guys are egotistical. They like to brag about it. You can get them to sort of, in some cases, say how they got in, which might be a crucial piece. They typically offer a proof of life, which is a listing of the files they took, so that'll tell you, what impact that the threat actor had on them. Some of these groups, you actually can't pay them because of federal law. Some of these groups are sanctioned because they're allied with, Russia or the DPRK, so on and so forth. So some of these groups, you can't even pay them anyways. But typically, these first two, buying you time and trying to figure out what they did, are why you negotiate. Some of these ransomware groups will offer you a pen testing report, so they'll actually write you up what they did, in theory. That's also another thing to get out of them. Cool. So I've got a couple minutes left, and I'll breeze through these case studies real fast. We have Wizard Spider over here. Wizard Spider was a long-running group. They started off making TrickBot, which is a banking Trojan, and they eventually moved on to ransomware. So Ryuk is the first variation of this. That group kind of folded into Conti. Conti was probably the most prolific ransomware actor of 2021-ish. And in 2022, time is very fluid. When the Russo-Ukraine war broke out, the group said publicly they sided with Russia. Some people didn't like that, and they ended up leaking everything, and the group dissolved. Some of the remnants of that group now form the Blockbuster group. Conti is very interesting. It's a legitimate case study in that they ran the operation like a business. They had an HR department, they had a developers department, they had they had a call center set up, there was executive leadership at the top, so it was run very much like a company. The group who was not happy with siding with Russia decided to leak everything from organization charts to chat logs to the actual code and backend work that they did. From here, we learned for sure that the group is actually affiliated with the Russian FSB, so Kremlin, basically. These leaks are available online. You can Google them, you can read them. People have translated the Cyrillic to English, but Wizard Spider is still active. I don't know that we're officially tracking them as Blockbuster because the group's changed a lot, but that's essentially the timeline of Banking Trojan all the way to Riot, Conti Block. These are all crypto lockers. So Conti is probably one of the more infamous ones. The next one is Scattered Spider. At this point, the name gives me PTSD. They've started out targeting business process outsourcing companies. So if you call a call center, it might be outsourced. So you might be calling Best Buy for help, right? It might be outsourced to another company. They started targeting those in order to gain access into other different companies. And then they started targeting T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, these telecom providers. Their whole goal was to get access to critical infrastructure. We've got all these cell phones there because they were in a lot of telecom companies. They like to use SIM swapping, so they will essentially, on the back end, take your phone number, move it to their phone number or their phone, and they'll able to be authenticate as you into client environments. So that's their primary thing. They really love SIM swapping. Now they're doing a lot of phishing or voice phishing. They'll call into the help desk and they'll say, hey, I got a new phone. I need a password reset. I need MFA reset. They're able to spend 10, 20, 30 minutes on help desk to get an account back. They're very unique in that they're able to move within the environment and exfil data within hours. We've seen them within 6 hours establish major persistence across the entire environment, on-prem to cloud to identity provider, and they're already exfilling data. So they move extremely fast. And lately, they've started deploying ransomware. About early-mid this year, they partnered with AlphaV, with their AlphaV cryptoware. So they not only do exfil, they also ransom the data at the same time. And they're very good at leaving backdoors for them. So with the SIM swapping, we still see that happening on the back end for some people, but most of the access is phishing. And then the last one is Intrix Spider. These guys actually started out in 2014. They were called the Evil Corp. And that name still kind of lives on. So these are probably the longest running ransomware threat actor that I can think of. Now they're called Lockbit, which I mentioned earlier. So they're probably the largest and oldest ransomware as a service group. They also run like a business. They have multiple tiers of support. You can literally pay for their green tier, the black tier, the gold premium tier for their ransomware, which comes with different documentation and different levels of support from Lockbit. They also have a bug bounty program, so if you want to help find the bugs within the ransomware, they'll pay you handsomely for your time. So very much like a company. They have, like I mentioned, these groups all have some sort of affiliation with each other. Indrix Spider and Vice Spider are two other ransomware groups. They use Lockbit, and they've also had people float in and out of these groups. But yeah, this threat actor is still active. We're coming up on almost 10 years of them being active, and so they don't necessarily have a nation-state affiliation. Wizard Spider Conti was directly involved with the FSB. Scattered is all over the globe, and Bitwise is all over the globe. So these guys are, like I said, the most prolific group aside from Conti, and now we're getting Alfie, Black Bass, a couple other groups. But I know I'm running out of time, so I do have a couple minutes for Q&A if anyone has anything. Yep. We'll get you the mic.
If let's say you have your regarding crypto, if it's in your wallet, do they access when they do, if they can hack it, do they use it? Sorry, do they do it using a private server or a public server?
So crypto as in Bitcoin, that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Some threat actors target Bitcoin. We have had a couple cases where they target, they actually target the blockchain. They're able to override the blockchain and get money. But typically they use crypto only for payment purchases, so they can't be tracked. They don't necessarily target hardware, keys, or tokens on the system. Most companies don't deal with crypto because it's not fiat currency or backed by anything. So that's not a typical target, but we have seen some threat actors go after crypto. Hopefully that answers your question.
So in these groups, how many people, what's this organization, this business that you're talking about, with the SAS, or not SAS, the RASS, how many people are involved? How do they make, I see how are they paid a salary? How does that work as an organization? It just seems crazy.
Yeah, so offhand, I don't have the answer offhand. I can tell you that, yeah, some of them were salaried. Conti paid out salaries to their people based on the ransoms they took. So their funding came from the ransoms they took. So everyone had a salary. People had bonuses based on what they got. The affiliates, they get a cut of every ransom they take. So they might get, so if they ransom a company for 10 million, they'll get 3-4 million of that cut, and the rest goes to say Lockbit or Black Boss or whatever. So they run like a true company with salaries, HR, and all of that. Some of the groups are not as well organized. I didn't mention any of the lesser organized groups. These are all very organized, and they run pretty much like a typical business.
If they access your phone and take over your phone, would you know it as a user? And what is vulnerable when they do take over your phone?
You may not notice it as a user. What you'll notice is you can't make calls, you can't make text messages, whatever, right? You can, to a degree, lock your SIM card at the carrier level. You can tell Verizon, hey, I want it locked to this phone. They call it port freeze or SIM card lock. It's not foolproof. They can still get around it. They do have some back-end ties into telecom infrastructure. But typically you'll say, I'm not getting any messages, I can't make phone calls, and then you'll try and call Verizon or whatever and say, your phone, it's not your phone, it's numbers on a different device. In order to combat this, we tell people to use hardware tokens or RSA keys. I think I have a very small one here. I have a little hardware key on my laptop, and so that acts, instead of texting me for a 2FA code or authentication, it reads the hardware token itself. Also, you'll see some people are walking around with RSA token, a little 6-digit A. You can't fake that. That token is a hardware thing that generates it. So that's the main way to combat the SIM swapping, is you just don't use it for 2FA or MFA. Hey, Dr. Manson.
Non-technical question.
All right.
CrowdStrike and Cal Poly have developed a pretty cool relationship over the years. What is it that CrowdStrike likes about what Cal Poly does to prepare students.
Do you mind if I quote you?
Yeah.
So, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Manson here used to have the 50-50 rule, which is, 50% of your studies happen in class and 50% happen outside of class. Cal Poly does competitions like CCDC, CPTC, ITC, NCAE, NCL, CAEX. The list kind of goes on and on and on. So, a lot of the schools that we recruit from have a heavy emphasis in extracurricular activities where students are able to self-learn. I know Cal Poly is very big on it. The other SoCal school that's very big on it is USC. Those are the two big schools that we work with. They always go above and beyond to hone their own skills outside of the classroom. So 50-50. The SOC, yeah. So Cal Poly is a student-run SOC, and that was a big program, as well as a student-run data center. Things have changed a little bit since the pandemic, but that was a big one. But before that, it was definitely CCDC. I mean, we started with Jace way back when, and we're now up to, we just hired a couple of people, or we'll be hiring a couple of Cal Poly people soon. So, yeah. If that's it, cool. So, thank you all, and I will put this. And there are no Zoom questions. Right. Thank you. Yep.
You